The Betrayal and the Curse. The village of Njoro sat nestled between rolling hills and the wide, winding Lolonga River. The people thrived off the land and water, their traditions woven into the rhythm of nature. Among them was Zola, a woman whose beauty was whispered about from neighboring villages. Zola had smooth, dark skin that gleamed like polished onyx under the sun. Her high cheekbones, full lips, and piercing almond-shaped eyes made her the envy of women and the desire of men. But no one loved her more than her husband, Django. Django was not just any man, he was the village's greatest hunter, a man of honor and strength, whose broad shoulders carried both the weight of his spears and the love of his people. He had chosen Zola as his wife, giving her a home, love, and protection. But despite Django's devotion, Zola's heart was restless. She looked at the small hut they shared and felt caged. She saw the same faces every day, the same daily routine, the same struggles. Deep inside her, a yearning for more whispered in her ears. And then, Sefi came to Njoro. A stranger in the village. Sefi was tall, lean, and draped in fine, foreign clothes, unlike the rough linen of the village men. His skin was dark like Django's, but his eyes held a different fire, a knowing, seductive gleam. He wore rings of gold and ivory, his fingers adorned with wealth that no hunter in Njoro could afford. He claimed to be a traveler from the east, a merchant who had seen the great cities beyond the hills, where women dressed in silk and drank wine sweeter than honey. Zola was captivated. He spoke of places where she could wear golden beads, where she would be waited on by servants, where the stars would shine just for her. A woman as beautiful as you does not belong in a place so small, Sefi whispered one evening, his voice like silk. Come with me, Zola. I will make you a queen. Her heart thundered in her chest. She knew it was wrong, knew she was Django's wife, but the desire for a new life overpowered reason. She began meeting Sefi in secret, sneaking away while Django hunted in the deep woods. But eyes in Njoro were always watching. The elders warning. Grandmother Moyo, the village elder, had seen many things in her long years. She walked with a staff, her wrinkled face marked by wisdom, and her eyes held the weight of past generations. One day, she pulled Zola aside, her bony fingers tight around her wrist. You are playing with fire, child, she whispered. The gods do not take betrayal lightly. Zola scoffed. What do the gods know of my heart, Moyo? The old woman shook her head. There is a balance in this world, Zola. When you break sacred vows, the spirits take their due. Zola rolled her eyes, laughing. I do not fear old tales. Grandmother Moyo sighed deeply, watching as Zola walked away toward her secret meetings with Sefi. She knew the gods were already watching. And they would not be kind. The discovery. One night, Django returned early from his hunt. He stepped into their hut and found it empty. The fire burned low, the bedding untouched. His heart pounded. Silently, he followed the faint footprints leading toward the edge of the village. As he moved through the darkness, his worst fears were confirmed. Under the soft glow of the full moon, he saw them. Zola stood near the riverbank, her arms draped around Sefi's neck, their bodies close, too close. Django froze, his breath caught in his throat. For a moment, rage blinded him. His fist clenched, his vision blurred. Then, something inside him broke. This was the woman he had loved, the woman he had fought for, the woman he had given everything. And she had betrayed him. Banished. When Zola saw Django's shadow step forward, her blood turned to ice. His face was dark, unreadable, but his eyes burned like the fire of the gods themselves. Django, I go. His voice was low, but it carried the weight of thunder. Leave my home. Leave my life. You are no wife of mine. Zola's chest tightened. This was not what she wanted. She wanted Django to fight for her, to prove he needed her more than his pride. But there was no hesitation in his voice. No second chances. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. Zola felt her world crumble. Sephew, the man who had promised her the world, only smiled. "Now you are free, my love." But suddenly, his smile did not seem so kind anymore. A desperate plea to the river. The village shunned her. No one spoke her name, no one looked her way. Even Sephew left, vanishing like mist, his promises of a grand life nothing but empty words. She had lost everything. With tears streaming down her face, Zola ran into the forest, her feet bare and bloodied. She reached the Lolonga River, the place where she had once played as a child. She fell to her knees, sobbing. "Great spirits of the river, I have lost everything. Please, take away my pain. Give me a new life where I will never suffer again." The wind stilled. The water darkened. And then, a figure emerged. Mugaya, the river spirit. A shape rose from the depths, its form shifting like mist and shadow. Mugaya, the spirit of the river, towered over her, his eyes glowing like the moon on water. His voice was smooth and cold. "You wish to escape your pain?" Zola nodded desperately. "Yes. Take it away. Make me whole again." The spirit's lips curved into a smile. "Then I bless you, child of water." The air crackled. The river rose. Zola's body convulsed as a searing pain rippled through her veins. She gasped, her skin hardened. Her legs fused together, stretching and twisting. Her arms weakened, her fingers curling into smooth, scaled coils. She screamed, or tried to. But only a hiss escaped her lips. She looked down at herself and froze in horror. She had become a serpent. The river roared with laughter, its waters rising and crashing. Zola writhed, her new serpent body gliding across the wet stones. Her beauty was gone, her humanity stolen, her soul claimed by the river itself. She had begged for a new life. And the spirits had given her exactly what she asked for. A life in the shadows. The Lolonga River whispered in the night. It carried stories from the past, memories of laughter, love, and betrayal. It was the only thing Zola had left. She slithered through the thick jungle, her long serpent body gliding effortlessly over moss-covered stones. The night air was humid, filled with the sounds of insects and rustling leaves. Though she had been cursed, Mugaya's magic was not entirely cruel. She discovered that when the moon rose, she could take on her human form once more. But she was never fully human again. Her once smooth skin now bore faint scales, her eyes glowed golden, and her movements had become too fluid, too unnatural. During the day, she was forced to remain in her serpent form, hiding in the shadows of the jungle. Watching. Always watching. Watching the life that was once hers. From the safety of the jungle, Zola could see the village of Njoro. She saw the children playing near the huts. She saw the women weaving baskets, the men returning from the hunt, their spears slung over their backs. And most of all, she saw Django. He had grown leaner, the burden of heartbreak weighing on his once proud shoulders. But he was still strong. Still the mighty hunter she had once loved. But he was not alone. A small boy, no more than 5 summers old, ran to him, wrapping tiny arms around Django's legs. Zola felt her heart shatter. Kito. Her son. Our son. Tears burned her eyes. She wanted to call out to him, to hold him, to tell him that his mother was still here. But she knew the truth. She was no longer his mother. She was a creature of the river, a whisper in the shadows, a thing that did not belong in the world of men. Django moves on. Zola spent many moons watching. She had hoped Django would remain alone, suffering as she did. But time did not wait for sorrow. One evening, she saw him standing outside his hut, speaking with Adia, a woman from a neighboring village. Zola felt a surge of jealousy. Adia was kind. Her smile was soft, and her hands were gentle when she reached out to touch Kito's hair. Zola's blood boiled. How dare she? That was her son. That was her husband. But she could do nothing. So, she watched. And waited. Until the day came when she saw Django and Adia standing together before the elders. A wedding ceremony. Her Django was now Adia's husband. Her Kito was now Adia's son. And Zola. She was nothing. A shadow. A curse. The whispering begins. The loneliness became too much. She could not speak to Django, but Kito was different. Kito was still hers. So, she called to him. Not in words, but in dreams. On the night of the full moon, as he lay in his mat beside Adia, Zola's voice would slip into his dreams, wrapping around his thoughts like a vine. Kito. The boy would stir, his tiny brow furrowing. Come to the river, my son. He tossed in his sleep, his breath shallow, his mind tangled in the whispers of a voice he did not understand. Find me. I am waiting for you. Kito would wake, his small body covered in sweat. He did not know why, but something inside him longed for the river. Fear grows in the village. It did not take long for the elders to notice. Kito began to wander toward the river in his sleep, his feet leaving faint tracks in the mud. The villagers grew uneasy. Fires burned lower at night, and even the strongest warriors refused to fetch water after sunset. The wind carried hushed voices. Something is watching us. The river is restless. It is her. She has returned. And one night, Grandmother Moyo stood before the village elders, her face grim. She raised her staff, her voice filled with the weight of truth. Zola has returned, but not as the woman we once knew. The village fell silent. Django sat still, his jaw clenched, his fingers digging into the earth. She is no longer one of us, Moyo continued. She is something else. A thing of the river. And she is calling her child to her. Django's chest tightened. Is Zola? No. Zola was dead. Wasn't she? Django's choice. That night, Django could not sleep. The moon cast long shadows outside his hut, and the sound of the wind carried whispers he could not ignore. Kito slept soundly beside Adia, his small chest rising and falling. But in the depths of his heart, Django felt it. Something was out there. Something was waiting. And for the first time since he had banished her, he allowed himself to wonder. Could it be true? Could Zola still exist beyond the river's edge? His heart pounded heavily in his chest. There was only one way to find out. The hunter's nightmare. The night air was thick and heavy, the kind that whispered of something unnatural. Django's chest felt tight, a feeling of unease settling deep into his bones. He had spent the day hunting, his spear striking true, but his heart had been elsewhere. His son, Kito, had grown quiet in recent moons, his once bright laughter dimmed by something unseen. The boy would wake up in the middle of the night, sweat beading his forehead, eyes filled with something distant, as if he had walked between the worlds of dream and reality. And now, Kito was missing. Django had searched their hut, then the neighbors, but the boy was gone. And there was only one place left to look. The river. Footsteps in the mud. Django ran through the village, his pulse pounding. The night was silent, too silent, except for the distant sound of lapping water. He found small footprints in the dirt, Kito's. They led toward the Lolonga River. His hands tightened around his spear. He is sleepwalking again, he told himself. That is all. But deep down, he knew better. The whispers, the strange presence lingering near the village. Grandmother Moyo had warned him. Zola has returned. She is no longer one of us. He hadn't wanted to believe it. But now, with each step toward the riverbank, dread coiled around his heart like a snake tightening its grip. And when he reached the water's edge, the breath in his lungs froze. Zola in her true form. There, beneath the silver glow of the full moon, was Zola. Her serpent body glistened, half submerged in the dark waters, her coils wrapped protectively around something small. Kito. The boy stood in her embrace, his eyes wide, his expression entranced, as if caught in a spell only he could hear. Django's heart stopped. His wife, the woman he had once loved, the woman he had banished, was no longer human. She was a creature of the river, her long body shimmering like liquid jade, her golden eyes glowing in the darkness. Kito. Django's voice was sharp, filled with terror. Kito blinked but did not move. Zola lifted her gaze to Django, and for the first time in years, their eyes met. Django felt his throat close. Despite the monstrous form, despite the curse, she was still his Zola. And the look in her eyes was not one of malice. It was pleading. Django, she whispered, her voice still the same, soft, sorrowful, aching. Please. A plea for forgiveness. Django's grip tightened on his spear. Let him go. His voice was hoarse, filled with warning. Zola held on to Kito, but she did not move closer. I am still his mother. Django's hands trembled with rage. You are nothing but a spirit now. Zola's face twisted with pain, her coils shifting in the water. I never meant for this to happen. Django's chest heaved. And yet, here we are. Zola looked down at Kito, her expression softening. I never stopped loving him, Django. I never stopped loving you. Something inside Django cracked, but he pushed it down. Love. He spat the word. You call this love? Stealing him from his home. Poisoning his mind. Zola flinched. I only wanted to see him. Django's knuckles whitened. You had your chance, Zola. But you threw it away. Her golden eyes darkened. I did not throw it away. You took it from me. Django felt a chill creep down his spine. There was no reasoning with a spirit. He had to end this. The storm breaks. As if sensing his intent, the winds howled, and the river began to churn. A violent storm erupted from nowhere, the trees bending, the water rising. Zola's form flickered, the magic in the air humming like an unseen force. Django took a step forward, his spear raised. You will not take him. Zola's eyes widened in fear. Django, no. But he had already lunged. The spear cut through the air, aimed straight for her heart. But before it could strike, the river roared, a great wave rising between them, knocking Django off his feet. The water swallowed him whole, and for a moment, all he knew was darkness. Zola vanishes. When Django surfaced, gasping for breath, Zola was gone. The river was calm again, as if nothing had happened. And Kito lay on the shore, unconscious but unharmed. Django staggered toward him, pulling the boy into his arms. He pressed his forehead to his son's, whispering prayers of thanks to the ancestors. But his hands wouldn't stop shaking. He had seen Zola's face. He had seen the tears in her eyes. And despite everything, despite the curse, despite the betrayal, he had seen her humanity still trapped inside the serpent's form. She had let Kito go. But Django knew it wasn't over. Not yet. Kito is changed. They returned to the village, but Kito was never the same. The boy stopped laughing. He would wake in the middle of the night, whispering in his sleep. He would sit by the water's edge, staring into the depths, as if waiting for something. And worst of all, he still heard her voice. Come to me, my son. The elders gathered, their faces grim. Grandmother Moyo touched Django's shoulder, her voice soft but firm. She is not gone, Django. And if we do nothing, she will return for him. Django's jaw tightened. He knew what had to be done. Zola had to be stopped. Once and for all. The children of the serpent. The Lulonga River had always called to Kito. As a child, he would sit by its edge, watching the rippling currents as they whispered secrets only he could hear. His father, Django, had always warned him to stay away, but something inside him ached for the water. Now, as a young man, the call was stronger than ever. The river's call. Kito sat by the dying fire in the village square, the stars bright above him. His hands trembled as he stared at the embers, his heart heavy with something he could no longer ignore. "Father," he finally said. Django, sharpening his hunting spear, barely looked up. "What is it?" Kito hesitated before whispering. "I hear her." Django's hands stopped moving. Slowly, he lifted his gaze, his dark eyes hard and knowing. "Who?" But Django already knew. Kito swallowed. "My mother." Django's knuckles whitened around the spear. His breathing grew sharp, and for a long time, he did not speak. Then, his voice came like a blade. "She is not your mother anymore." Kito flinched, but he did not look away. "She calls to me, Father. Every night. I hear her voice in the water, in my dreams." Django rose to his feet, his expression dark and unreadable. "Then we must end this." Kito's stomach twisted. He knew what his father meant. He wanted to kill her. Django prepares for war. The village warriors gathered by the river's edge, their spears sharp, their faces set with grim determination. Django stood before them, his voice steady and commanding. "For too long, we have lived in fear. For too long, the river has taken our peace." The warriors murmured in agreement, gripping their weapons tighter. "Tonight, we put an end to it." A cheer rose through the warriors. But among them, Kito stood frozen. He should have felt relief. This was what was right, wasn't it? But as he looked toward the moonlit river, his heart ached with uncertainty. Was it truly a monster they were hunting? Or was it simply a mother trying to reclaim her son? Kito's escape. That night, Kito could not sleep. The weight of his father's decision crushed him, filling his chest with something he could not name. Then, as the village lay silent, he heard it. A voice, soft as water, clear as the wind. "Come, my son." His breath hitched. He rose from his mat, moving without thinking. Before he knew it, he was running. Through the village, past the sleeping huts, past the darkened fires, toward the river that had always called to him. And there, waiting for him at the water's edge, was Zola. Mother and son. She rose from the depths, her massive serpent body glistening in the moonlight. Her golden eyes softened as they met his. "My Kito," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Kito staggered back, his breath shallow. She was even more beautiful and terrifying than he had remembered. A woman, but not a woman. A mother, but not of the land. Her scales shimmered, her face so familiar yet so different. "You are like me," she said, voice low and knowing. "You carry my blood." Kito's heart pounded. "What does that mean?" She smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "You are more than human. You are more than what they tell you." The river lapped at his feet, the night wind whispering through the trees. Then, she said the words that would change everything. "Join me, Kito." A terrible choice. Kito froze. "What?" Zola lifted her hands, her voice soft but firm. "The word of men is not your only path. Come with me, and I will show you the life that was meant for you." Kito shook his head. I can't. You can. Her voice was like a song, pulling him toward the water. Or you can stay here, live the life your father has given you, but you must forget me. Kito's chest ached. 2 words. 2 choices. The mother who had called to him his entire life. The father who had raised him with love and honor. How could he choose? The warriors arrive. Before he could speak, a shout echoed through the trees. Django and the warriors emerged, their spears gleaming in the moonlight. Kito turned in horror. Father, wait. Django's face was set in stone, his body tense. Step away from her, Kito. Zola's eyes flashed. You come to kill me again, Django. Django raised his spear, his voice like thunder. You are no wife of mine. You are no mother to him. Kito felt the air shift, the tension thick as the river mist. One wrong move, and blood would be spilled. The desperate escape. The moon hung heavy over the Lolonga River, its pale light reflecting on the trembling water. Django stood at the river's edge, his spear raised, his warriors behind him, their breaths heavy with tension. Across from them, Zola loomed, her serpent body coiled, her golden eyes burning like fire. Kito stood between them, his arms outstretched, his face filled with desperation. No, he cried. This is madness. Stop. But the time for words had passed. The battle had begun. The wrath of the serpent. Django lunged forward, his spear thrusting toward the monster his wife had become. Zola struck back, her massive tail sweeping through the water, sending warriors stumbling backward. The warriors shouted, some throwing spears, others swinging machetes, their blades flashing in the moonlight. But Zola was faster than any of them. She moved like the river itself, fluid, untouchable, furious. Her serpent coils smashed through the water, knocking warriors off their feet. One by one, they fell back, their attacks futile against her power. Only Django stood firm, his spear gripped tightly, his eyes locked on hers. This is not the woman I loved, he told himself. This is a demon. And demons must be destroyed. Kito's plea. Stop this. Both of you. Kito's voice was raw with emotion, but neither of them listened. Zola, fueled by fury and pain, lashed out again, her tail crashing against the riverbank, sending sand and water flying. Django dodged, his breath heavy. His muscles burned, but he would not stop. Not until she was gone for good. Kito's heart twisted. This wasn't supposed to happen. He had thought. He had hoped. That they could find peace. But peace had never been an option. Not for a creature of the river. Not for a hunter of the land. Not for a son caught between 2 worlds. The fatal blow. Django saw an opening. In the chaos, Zola turned, her golden eyes locked on Kito, her body coiling defensively. In that moment, Django struck. The spear pierced her side, sinking deep into flesh and scale. A scream tore through the night, unlike anything the village had ever heard. It was not just a scream of pain. It was the cry of a spirit wounded, a mother betrayed, a soul torn apart. The river shuddered, as if feeling her agony. Kito's legs gave out, his knees hitting the mud. Mother, he cried. Zola's golden eyes met his, and for the first time since her transformation, they were filled with something human. Something that looked like love. Then, her body lurched back, the spear still buried in her side. She turned toward the water, her coil slipping beneath the surface. The river swallowed her whole. And then, she was gone. The spirit's wrath. The moment Zola disappeared, the river spirits awakened. The sky darkened, clouds twisting in unnatural shapes. The wind howled, shaking the trees, whispering in a language that no human could understand. The warriors staggered back, their spears trembling in their hands. Even Django, the fearless hunter, felt his heart quake. They had wounded something ancient. Something that did not forgive. The waters churned, waves crashing against the shore, pulling at the land as if trying to reclaim it. Kito felt the pull of the current, as if something was calling him to. She is still here. He clutched his chest, gasping. He could still feel her presence, as if she had not truly left. Because she hadn't. Zola was not dead. She was waiting. And she would return. The broken son. Django stumbled back, gripping his spear, his breath ragged. He had wounded her, yes. But he had not destroyed her. She was still out there, lurking beneath the depths, waiting for the moment to rise again. The warriors murmured among themselves, some claiming victory, others not so sure. But only Django and Kito knew the truth. The battle was over. But the war was not. Kito remained kneeling in the mud, staring at the dark water, his hands shaking. He had wanted to choose. But the choice had been made for him. Now, he had lost them both. His father, the hunter. His mother, the serpent. And he was caught between them, cursed to be neither. Forever. The final reckoning. The years passed like the changing tides, and Kito became a man of his own making. He had a wife, a son, and a quiet life in the village, far from the whispers of the river. But the past never left him. The Lulonga River still called to him in his sleep. Some nights, he would wake, his heart pounding, his skin damp with sweat, the sound of water rushing in his ears. No matter how much he tried, he could not escape the echo of his mother's voice. The dream that changed everything. One night, as the village lay in slumber, Kito found himself dreaming of the river. The air was thick with mist, and the moon's silver light reflected on the still water. And there, at the edge of the river, stood a woman. She was not a serpent. She was not a shadow. She was his mother. Zola. Her dark eyes were full of sorrow, her face as he remembered it before the curse had taken her. She stretched out her hand, her voice soft, broken, longing. My son, please, let me go. Kito's breath hitched. He reached out and woke gasping for air. The wind outside was silent, but the river whispered, calling him. This time, he would answer. The final meeting. The night was still as Kito walked toward the riverbank, his feet moving as if guided by something beyond himself. He should have been afraid, but he wasn't. The river had haunted him his entire life, and tonight, he would face it once and for all. And then, he saw her. Standing at the water's edge. Not a serpent, not a shadow, but a woman. Zola. For the first time in decades, she looked fully human, her dark braided hair flowing in the wind, her deep brown eyes shining with tears. She turned to him, her lips trembling, her hands reaching out. Kito, she whispered. His chest tightened, his breath shallow. This was not possible. And yet, here she was. Oh. Human. Real. The mother's plea. Zola took a step closer, her hands over her heart. I have lived in darkness for too long, she said, her voice heavy with regret. I have carried my sin, my curse, my pain. But I have never stopped loving you. Kito's throat burned. Why now? Tears fell down Zola's cheeks, her body shaking. Because the spirits demand more than suffering. They demand love. And I cannot leave this world until you forgive me. Kito's hands clenched, emotions colliding in his chest. The pain, the anger, the longing. He had hated her. He had loved her. And through it all, she had never truly left him. The curse breaks. His vision blurred, his chest tightening. And then, he embraced her. His arms wrapped around his mother, and as soon as he did, the river trembled. Zola gasped, her fingers digging into his back, her body convulsing. Tears fell onto her skin, and where they touched, the scales that had haunted her for years faded away. A warm golden glow spread through the air, the wind whispering a sacred hymn. The spirits had accepted her repentance. The curse was lifting. Zola's knees buckled, her breath coming in ragged sobs. Kito held her tighter, feeling her heartbeat slow. "Mama," he whispered. "It's over." Zola's last breath. Zola smiled through her tears, her hands cupping Kito's face. "You have given me peace." Her eyes fluttered closed, and a sigh escaped her lips, soft, final, full of relief. She slumped into his arms, her body light as air, her warmth fading. Kito held her, silent, as the wind softened, the river calmed, the night stilled. Her body slowly dissolved into light, fading into the water she had once been bound to. For the first time in years, the river was quiet. And she was gone. Finally, free. A new dawn. Kito sat by the river until the first light of dawn crept over the horizon. The sky was painted with soft golds and pinks, the world washed anew. He whispered a final prayer, his voice gentle, unburdened. "May your spirit rest, Mama." The wind carried his words, as if delivering them to wherever she had gone. And as he rose, stepping away from the river for the last time, he knew. The curse had ended. The river would never call to him again. He was finally free. The end.